The red sands of Mars stretched endlessly under the pale light of a distant sun. The horizon shimmered with hues of orange and gold, a stark contrast to the cold, metallic structures that dotted the landscape. Humanity had finally reached the stars, or at least one of them, but the dream of colonizing Mars was not without its challenges. Among those living on this alien world was Karoline Leavitt, a journalist known for her sharp tongue and unrelenting curiosity. She had been sent to Mars not just to report on the progress of the colony, but also to keep an eye on the fragile relationship between Earth and its newest outpost. Karoline sat in her small office inside the main habitat dome. The walls were lined with screens displaying live feeds from Earth, news articles, and data streams about the colony's operations. Her desk was cluttered with notes and half-empty coffee mugs. Outside, settlers bustled about their daily routines, maintaining equipment, conducting experiments, or simply trying to survive in the harsh environment. It was a delicate balance, one that required constant vigilance and cooperation. But today, Karoline wasn't focused on any of that. Instead, her attention was fixed on something much closer to home: politics. A video clip played repeatedly on one of her monitors. It showed Michelle Obama, the former First Lady of the United States, delivering a speech at a charity gala back on Earth. Her words were sharp and cutting, filled with humor but laced with criticism aimed squarely at Donald Trump. "Some people," she said, pausing for effect as the audience laughed, "think building walls will solve all our problems. Maybe next they'll suggest we build one around the moon." The room erupted into applause, but Karoline felt a pang of irritation. While she didn't agree with everything Trump stood for, she admired his vision for space exploration. His administration had championed private initiatives that helped fund projects like the Martian colony. And now, here was Michelle Obama, mocking him, and by extension the very idea of reaching beyond Earth. Karoline leaned back in her chair, tapping her pen against the desk. She knew the comments weren't directed at her personally, nor were they specifically about Mars, but still, they stung. To her, they represented a growing disconnect between Earth and its colonies, a divide that threatened the future of humanity itself. On Mars, every decision mattered. Every resource counted. People worked tirelessly to ensure survival, often putting aside petty differences for the greater good. Back on Earth, though, it seemed politics had become nothing more than a game, a competition to see who could land the best punchline. Her thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the door. "Come in," she called out, straightening up slightly. The door slid open to reveal Daniel Hayes, another reporter stationed on Mars. Unlike Karoline, Daniel thrived on controversy. He had built his career by stirring up trouble and exposing scandals, real or imagined. His presence always made her uneasy. "Hey, Karoline," he said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "I saw you watching that clip of Michelle Obama. Pretty funny, huh?" "Funny?" Karoline raised an eyebrow. "You think making fun of someone's policies is funny?" Daniel shrugged, leaning casually against the wall. "It's entertainment. That's what people want these days. Besides, it's not like Trump ever cared about science or technology. All he wanted was headlines." "That's not true," Karoline shot back. "He may have had his flaws, but he understood the importance of pushing boundaries. Without his support, this colony might not exist." Daniel smirked, clearly enjoying the argument. "Oh, come on. You're telling me you actually believe that? This place exists because of hard work and innovation, not because some politician decided to throw money at it." Karoline clenched her fists beneath the table. She hated arguing with Daniel, but he had a way of pushing her buttons. Still, she refused to let him get the last word. Maybe if more politicians thought like him, we'd be farther along than we are now. Instead, we're stuck dealing with people who care more about scoring points than solving problems. Daniel chuckled, shaking his head. "Well, good luck convincing anyone of that. Most people don't even know this colony exists, let alone care about how it got here." As he turned to leave, Karoline felt a spark of determination ignite within her. Maybe Daniel was right about one thing. Most people didn't know or care about Mars. But maybe it was time they did. If Michelle Obama's words could reach across millions of miles and stir up emotions, then surely Karoline could do the same, with a message of her own. She spent the next several hours drafting an article. It started as a simple response to Michelle Obama's speech pointing out the hypocrisy of mocking efforts to expand humanity's reach while ignoring the benefits such endeavors brought. But as Karoline wrote, her words grew sharper, more passionate. She highlighted the struggles faced by the settlers on Mars, the sacrifices they made, and the potential rewards waiting just beyond the horizon. By the time she finished, the piece was less of a rebuttal and more of a rallying cry, for unity, for ambition, and for hope. When the article went live, it spread like wildfire. Social media platforms lit up with reactions, both positive and negative. Supporters praised Karoline for standing up for the colony, while critics accused her of being overly defensive and out of touch. On Earth, debates raged over whether resources should continue flowing to Mars when so many issues remained unresolved at home. Meanwhile, on Mars itself, opinions were divided. Some settlers applauded Karoline's boldness, while others worried her actions might draw unwanted attention, or, worse, retaliation, from Earth. Despite the backlash, Karoline couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. For years, she had reported on events happening elsewhere, never truly feeling like she was part of something bigger. Now, though, she realized her words had power. They could inspire change, or provoke conflict. Either way, they mattered. Little did she know, her article was only the beginning. Across the void separating Earth and Mars, tensions simmered, ready to boil over at any moment. And as the dust settled from her initial salvo, Karoline found herself at the center of a storm far greater than she had anticipated, one that would test not only her convictions, but also the fragile bond holding humanity's two worlds together. The fallout from Karoline's article rippled across both planets like a shockwave. On Earth, people were talking about Mars in ways they hadn't before. For some, it was the first time they'd even stopped to think about the colony's existence. Emma Carter, a young activist living in Chicago, found herself glued to her tablet as she scrolled through endless debates on social media. She had always admired Michelle Obama for her grace and intelligence, but now she saw her role model under attack, not just by Karoline Leavitt, but by what felt like an entire planet. Emma couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong with this picture. How could anyone justify spending billions of dollars on Mars when so many problems remained unsolved back home? Climate change was worsening, poverty was rampant, and millions of people still lacked access to basic necessities like clean water and health care. To her, the idea of colonizing another world seemed selfish and short-sighted, a luxury humanity couldn't afford. Determined to do something, Emma began organizing protests. She started small, reaching out to friends and local activists who shared her concerns. Together, they planned a march through downtown Chicago, carrying signs with slogans like Earth First and Fix Our World Before We Leave It. Word spread quickly, thanks in part to Emma's knack for storytelling. In interviews with news outlets, she spoke passionately about the need to prioritize humanity's survival on Earth over dreams of life among the stars. Her message resonated deeply with many. Within days, similar protests sprang up in cities around the globe. Social media feeds filled with images of crowds chanting slogans and holding banners. Some protesters wore green ribbons to symbolize their commitment to protecting the environment. Others carried pictures of children suffering from hunger or illness, urging governments to redirect funds earmarked for space exploration toward humanitarian efforts instead. On Mars, however, reactions were mixed. While some settlers sympathized with Emma's cause, others bristled at what they saw as an unfair attack. Ryan Foster, an engineer tasked with maintaining the colony's life support systems, watched footage of the protests during his lunch break. He shook his head in frustration as he listened to speakers accuse Martian settlers of abandoning Earth. "They don't understand," he muttered to himself. "This isn't about leaving Earth behind. It's about ensuring we have a future at all." Ryan wasn't alone in his frustration. Many settlers believed the protests misrepresented their work. They argued that Mars wasn't just a playground for rich dreamers. It was a testing ground for technologies that could benefit everyone. Advances in renewable energy, water recycling, and sustainable agriculture developed on Mars had already been adapted for use on Earth. Far from being wasteful, these innovations held the potential to solve some of the very problems protesters claimed to care about. Karoline felt torn. On one hand, she understood why people on Earth might feel neglected. On the other hand, she knew the reality of life on Mars, how every day was a struggle against impossible odds. The colony wasn't perfect, but it represented hope for a better future. Still, she couldn't ignore the growing divide between the two worlds. If left unchecked, it could spiral into something far worse than angry protests. Determined to bridge the gap, Karoline reached out to Ryan for help. "We need to show them what we're doing here," she told him during a meeting in the Habitat's cafeteria. "Not just talk about it, but really show them. Maybe if they see how hard we're working and how much good can come from it, they'll stop seeing us as enemies." Ryan nodded thoughtfully. "I agree, but how do we do that? Most people on Earth barely know we exist, let alone care about our projects. What if we invited someone from Earth to come here?" Karoline suggested. "Someone neutral who could report back honestly about what they see." Ryan frowned. "That's risky. What if they twist things around like Daniel Hayes would?" "Not talking about letting just anyone come," Karoline replied. "We need someone credible, someone who won't sensationalize everything. Someone like Emma Carter." Ryan blinked in surprise. "Wait, you mean the same Emma Carter leading those protests? Why would she ever agree to visit us?" "Because she cares," Karoline said firmly. "And because deep down, I think she wants to understand. If we can show her the truth, maybe she'll change her mind and maybe others will follow." It wasn't an easy sell. When Karoline contacted Emma via video link, the activist was skeptical at best. "Why should I trust you?" Emma asked bluntly. "Your article attacked Michelle Obama and dismissed valid concerns about Earth's priorities. Why would I want to step foot on your colony?" Karoline took a deep breath. "Because you're right about one thing. We owe Earth more than we've given so far. But shutting us down isn't the answer. Come see for yourself what we're trying to accomplish. If you still think we're wasting resources after that, then fine. But at least make your decision based on facts, not assumptions." After a long pause, Emma finally agreed. "Okay," she said, "but if this is some kind of PR stunt, I swear I'll expose it." As plans for Emma's visit took shape, tensions continued to rise. On Earth, critics accused Karoline of trying to manipulate public opinion. Meanwhile, on Mars, some settlers worried that inviting an outspoken opponent into their fragile community could backfire spectacularly. Despite the risks, Karoline remained convinced it was worth a shot. After all, what choice did they have? Ignoring the growing divide wouldn't make it disappear. In the weeks leading up to Emma's arrival, Karoline and Ryan worked tirelessly to prepare. They coordinated tours of key facilities, arranged meetings with scientists and engineers, and even set aside time for informal conversations with ordinary settlers. Their goal was simple: to present an honest, unfiltered view of life on Mars. When the day finally came, Emma stepped off the shuttle looking nervous but determined. Her eyes widened as she took in the alien landscape surrounding the colony. Red dust stretched endlessly in every direction, interrupted only by the gleaming domes of the habitat. Above, the pale sun cast long shadows across the barren terrain. It was breathtaking and unsettling. "This is different," Emma admitted as Karoline greeted her. "I guess I didn't expect it to feel so real." "That's because it is real," Karoline replied with a smile. "Welcome to Mars." Over the next few days, Emma immersed herself in the colony's daily operations. She toured labs where researchers worked on breakthrough technologies, visited farms where crops grew under artificial light, and observed technicians repairing equipment vital to the colony's survival. At each stop, she asked tough questions, challenging settlers to explain how their work benefited Earth. To her surprise, they had answers, concrete examples of innovations already making a difference back home. Still, doubts lingered. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Emma joined Karoline and Ryan for dinner in the communal dining hall. The room buzzed with quiet conversation as settlers ate meals prepared from locally grown ingredients. Emma picked at her food, lost in thought. "You seem troubled," Ryan said gently. "Something on your mind?" Emma hesitated before speaking. "I get it now. Why you're here. You're not just chasing dreams. You're fighting for survival. But I still can't shake the feeling that Earth deserves more. More attention, more resources, more care. How do you decide where to draw the line?" Karoline exchanged a glance with Ryan before answering. "The truth is, we don't have all the answers, no one does. But giving up on Mars won't fix Earth's problems. Abandoning this colony would mean abandoning everything we've learned and everything we might discover in the future. That's a risk we can't take." Emma nodded slowly, her expression thoughtful. For the first time since arriving, she allowed herself to consider the possibility that Mars wasn't the enemy. Perhaps, she realized, the real challenge lay in finding balance between ambition and responsibility, between dreaming big and staying grounded. As the meal ended, Karoline stood and raised her glass. "To understanding," she said simply. Around the table, others followed suit, clinking glasses in agreement. It was a small gesture, but it carried weight, a reminder that even in the vastness of space, human connections mattered most. Little did they know, their fragile truce was about to face its greatest test yet. Back on Earth, forces were already moving to exploit the growing divide for their own gain. And soon the choices made on both planets would ripple outward, shaping the destiny of humanity itself. The fragile peace between Earth and Mars was about to be tested in ways no one could have predicted. Emma Carter's visit had gone better than expected, but the seeds of doubt planted by her protests still lingered. Back on Earth, public opinion remained divided. While some people began to see the value of Mars as a source of innovation and progress, others clung to their belief that resources should stay focused on solving problems at home. The debate raged on, fueled by politicians, activists, and media outlets eager to capitalize on the growing tension. On Mars, Karoline Leavitt and Ryan Foster worked tirelessly to keep the colony running smoothly, while also preparing for what they hoped would be a turning point, a live debate between representatives from Earth and Mars. It was Karoline's idea, born out of desperation to bridge the widening gap between the two worlds. She envisioned it as an opportunity to showcase the colony's achievements and foster understanding. But organizing such an event wasn't easy, especially when trust between the planets was at an all-time low. Daniel Hayes, ever the opportunist, saw the debate as his chance to strike. He had been quietly working behind the scenes, gathering dirt on the Martian colony. His goal was simple: discredit Karoline and prove that the settlers were nothing more than reckless dreamers squandering Earth's resources. When he stumbled upon classified documents suggesting that certain leaders within the colony had exaggerated their successes to secure funding, he knew he'd hit the jackpot. The leak came during a routine transmission from Mars to Earth. Screens across the globe lit up with headlines accusing the colony of fraud. The accusations were damning. Allegations of falsified reports, inflated budgets, and even deliberate sabotage of equipment to create emergencies that justified additional funding. Public outrage erupted almost instantly. Protesters took to the streets again, this time demanding accountability. Politicians called for investigations, and calls to cut off supplies to Mars grew louder. Karoline felt the ground shift beneath her feet. The backlash was swift and brutal. Settlers who had once supported her efforts now questioned whether she had done more harm than good by inviting Emma and pushing for transparency. Even Ryan seemed shaken. "This is bad," he said, pacing back and forth in the control room. "If Earth pulls the plug on us, we're done. No second chances." "We can't let that happen," Karoline replied firmly. "But first, we need to figure out who's behind this. These leaks didn't just appear out of nowhere." Ryan stopped pacing and turned to face her. "You think someone inside the colony is responsible?" "I don't know," Karoline admitted. But I do know one thing. Daniel Hayes has been sniffing around here for weeks, asking questions he shouldn't. He's up to something. Determined to get to the bottom of the matter, Ryan began digging into the colony's systems. What he found shocked him. Hidden deep within the network logs were traces of unauthorized access. Someone had tampered with the data before it was sent to Earth. Whoever it was had covered their tracks well, but not perfectly. Ryan traced the activity to a terminal located in one of the maintenance hubs, far from the main habitat dome. Armed with this information, Karoline and Ryan decided to confront the person most likely responsible. Laura Myers, a former administrator who had been dismissed from the colony months earlier for unethical practices. Though officially banned from returning, rumors suggested she still had allies among the settlers, people willing to do her bidding if the price was right. Finding Laura wasn't easy. She operated in the shadows, avoiding direct contact with anyone who might recognize her. But Karoline and Ryan weren't about to give up. They enlisted the help of a few trusted settlers, including Emma, who had chosen to stay on Mars after her initial visit. Together, they devised a plan to lure Laura into revealing herself. Their opportunity came when a critical piece of equipment, the colony's main oxygen generator, began malfunctioning. Panic spread quickly as alarms blared throughout the habitat. Without functional backup systems, the settlers had only hours before breathable air became scarce. Ryan sprang into action, diagnosing the problem while Karoline coordinated efforts to calm the frightened population. As Ryan worked, he noticed something odd. The malfunction appeared deliberate. Someone had tampered with the system, creating a vulnerability that outsiders could exploit. Sure enough, shortly after the crisis began, Laura made her move. She contacted the colony via encrypted channel, offering to fix the generator for a price. Her demands were steep: immunity from prosecution, reinstatement as an administrator, and full control over the colony's communications with Earth. Karoline refused to negotiate. Instead, she used the situation to her advantage. Working with Ryan, she set a trap. They pretended to agree to Laura's terms, luring her to a remote section of the habitat where they could confront her directly. When Laura arrived, flanked by two accomplices, she was met not with compliance but with resistance. "You really thought we'd cave?" Karoline asked, stepping forward with a recording device in hand. "Everything you've done, the leaks, the sabotage, it's all on record now. You're finished," Laura sneered, clearly unimpressed. "You think this changes anything? Even if you expose me, the damage is done. Earth won't trust you anymore. Your little colony is doomed." For a moment, silence hung heavy in the air. Then Ryan spoke, his voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. "Maybe, but at least we'll go down fighting for something real. Not like you, hiding in the shadows and tearing everything apart for your own gain." With Laura's confession recorded, Karoline wasted no time broadcasting it to both planets. The revelation stunned audiences on Earth and Mars alike. Public opinion began to shift once more, this time in favor of the colony. Politicians who had previously called for sanctions against Mars suddenly found themselves defending its importance. Activists like Emma used the moment to advocate for renewed cooperation, emphasizing that humanity's future depended on working together, not tearing each other apart. In the days that followed, tensions eased, but only slightly. The incident served as a wake-up call for everyone involved. On Earth, leaders began discussing ways to ensure transparency and accountability in space exploration. On Mars, settlers vowed to hold themselves to higher standards, recognizing that their actions reflected not just on themselves but on all of humanity. For Karoline, the experience reinforced her belief in the power of truth. Despite the challenges they faced, she remained optimistic about the future. Standing on the edge of the red planet, watching the sun rise over the horizon, she allowed herself a small smile. The road ahead would be difficult, but it was a road worth traveling. After all, the stars were waiting, and humanity had only just begun to reach for them. The revelation of Laura Myers' betrayal sent shockwaves through both Earth and Mars. For the settlers, it was a moment of reckoning, a reminder that trust was fragile, especially in such an isolated and high-stakes environment. On Earth, the confession forced people to confront uncomfortable truths about their own biases and assumptions. While many had been quick to judge the Martian colony, they now realized how easily misinformation could twist reality. The tide of public opinion began to shift once more, but old wounds didn't heal overnight. Karoline Leavitt stood in the communications hub, staring at the screens displaying reactions from across the globe. Some commentators praised her for exposing Laura's plot, while others accused her of orchestrating the entire drama to deflect attention from the colony's shortcomings. It was exhausting, trying to navigate the endless cycle of praise and criticism. But what troubled her most was the lingering sense of division. Even with Laura's scheme uncovered, the rift between Earth and Mars felt as wide as ever. Ryan Foster joined her a few moments later carrying 2 steaming cups of coffee. "You look like you haven't slept in days," he said, handing her one of the mugs. "Take a break. We've done everything we can for now." "I wish I could," Carolina replied, taking a sip of the bitter liquid. "But this isn't over. Exposing Laura was just the first step. If we don't fix the bigger issues, all of this will happen again." Ryan nodded thoughtfully. "You're right. But where do we even start? Half the planet still thinks we're wasting resources, and the other half doesn't care enough to pay attention. We start by showing them what's possible when we work together," Karoline said firmly. "That debate you helped organize, it's our best chance to make people see the bigger picture. We need to focus on that." The live debate was scheduled to take place aboard the International Space Station, ISS, serving as neutral ground between Earth and Mars. It would be moderated by Alex Bennett, a seasoned diplomat known for his ability to remain impartial even in the most heated discussions. Both sides had agreed to participate, though tensions remained high. Emma Carter had volunteered to represent Earth, while Karoline would speak for Mars. Ryan, meanwhile, worked tirelessly behind the scenes to ensure the event went smoothly. As the day of the debate approached, preparations intensified. Karoline spent hours rehearsing her arguments, poring over data and testimonies from settlers who had benefited from innovations developed on Mars. She wanted to paint a clear picture of how the colony contributed not only to humanity's survival, but also to solving problems back on Earth. At the same time, she knew she couldn't ignore the valid concerns raised by activists like Emma. Balancing honesty with persuasion was no easy task. Emma, for her part, was equally determined. She had spent weeks gathering stories from communities affected by poverty, climate change, and inequality. Her goal was to remind everyone that while Mars might hold promise for the future, Earth's present demanded urgent action. Though she and Karoline had formed a tentative friendship during her stay on the Red Planet, Emma refused to soften her stance. "I'm not here to win an argument," she told Karoline during one of their practice sessions. "I'm here to fight for what's right." Despite their differences, both women recognized the importance of finding common ground. They met privately several times before the debate, discussing ways to frame their arguments without alienate each other's supporters. These conversations weren't always easy. There were moments of frustration and disagreement, but they laid the foundation for a dialogue that transcended politics. When the day finally arrived, the ISS buzzed with activity. Crew members scurried around, ensuring every detail was perfect. Cameras were set up to broadcast the event live to billions of viewers across both planets. As Karoline and Emma floated into the conference module, they exchanged a brief nod of mutual respect. Alex Bennett greeted them warmly, his calm demeanor helping ease some of the tension in the air. "Ladies and gentlemen," Alex began, addressing the audience via video link, "we gathered today to discuss one of the most pressing questions facing humanity. How do we balance our ambitions in space with the challenges we face here on Earth?" Representing Earth is Emma Carter, an advocate for social justice and environmental sustainability. And representing Mars is Karoline Leavitt, a journalist and resident of the Martian colony. Let us begin. The debate unfolded with intensity, each side presenting compelling arguments. Emma spoke passionately about the moral obligation to address Earth's crises before investing in extraterrestrial ventures. "We have the power to save lives right now," she argued. "Why should we spend billions on Mars when millions are suffering here?" Karoline countered with evidence of the colony's contributions to science and technology. Mars isn't a distraction, she insisted. It's a solution. The innovations we develop here can help solve problems on Earth. Abandoning this mission would mean abandoning hope itself. As the discussion deepened, technical glitches began to disrupt the proceedings. Monitors flickered, audio cut out intermittently, and cameras shifted erratically. Panic rippled through the control room as technicians scrambled to identify the source of the problem. Ryan, monitoring the situation remotely from Mars, quickly realized the sabotage wasn't over. Someone, or something, was deliberately interfering with the transmission. Working against the clock, Ryan traced the interference to a rogue signal originating from Earth. He alerted the ISS crew, who managed to isolate the affected systems and restore stability just as tempers threatened to boil over. The interruption gave Alex an opportunity to steer the conversation toward collaboration rather than conflict. "What if this isn't an either-or scenario?" he asked, leaning forward earnestly. "What if we can find ways to support both Earth and Mars simultaneously?" Emma hesitated, glancing at Karoline. For the first time, doubt crept into her expression. "I suppose it's possible," she admitted reluctantly, "but only if we prioritize transparency and accountability. And if we commit to sharing knowledge and resources," Karoline added, sensing a breakthrough. "This isn't about competition. It's about survival, for all of us." By the end of the session, no clear winner emerged. Both sides had made valid points, leaving audiences to grapple with complex emotions. Yet amid the uncertainty, a glimmer of hope emerged. Viewers on Earth and Mars alike began discussing ways to bridge the gap, not through division but through partnership. Activists proposed initiatives to channel funds from space exploration into humanitarian projects, while scientists explored methods to adapt Martian technologies for terrestrial use. For Karoline, the debate marked a turning point. Though challenges remained, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. Humanity's journey to the stars was far from smooth, but it was a journey worth pursuing, together. As she gazed out the ISS window at the distant blue orb of Earth, she allowed herself a moment of quiet reflection. The road ahead would be long and difficult, but for the first time in weeks, she believed it was a road they could walk side by side. Back on Mars, Ryan watched the final moments of the broadcast with a mixture of relief and pride. Despite everything they had endured, the colony had proven its resilience. More importantly, it had shown that even in the vastness of space, human connections mattered most. Together, they had taken a small but significant step toward unity, a reminder that no matter how far apart they might seem, Earth and Mars shared the same destiny. In the days following the debate, a strange calm settled over both Earth and Mars. It wasn't peace, not yet, but it was something closer to understanding. The live event had sparked conversations that went far beyond politics or science. People on both planets began talking about what it meant to be human, about shared struggles and shared dreams. For the first time in years, there was a sense of possibility, a fragile but undeniable hope that humanity could overcome its divisions. Karoline Leavitt returned to Mars with a renewed determination. The debate hadn't solved everything. She knew that. But it had planted seeds of change, and now her job was to nurture them. Back on the red planet, settlers greeted her with cautious optimism. Some were still wary of Earth's intentions, while others felt inspired by the idea of working together. Ryan Foster was among the latter group. He had spent hours analyzing feedback from the broadcast, compiling data on how viewers responded to different parts of the discussion. His findings confirmed what Karoline already suspected. People wanted solutions, not arguments. "We need to keep this momentum going," Ryan said during one of their late-night strategy sessions. "If we let things slide back to the way they were, all of this will have been for nothing." "I agree," Karoline replied, rubbing her temples. "But how? We can't just throw another debate or rally. People are tired of speeches. They want action." Ryan leaned back in his chair, thinking. What if we focus on smaller projects, things that show immediate results? like adapting Martian tech for use on Earth, or sharing resources in ways that benefit everyone. Karoline nodded slowly. That could work. If we can prove that cooperation leads to real improvements, maybe more people will get on board. With Ryan's help, Karoline began reaching out to leaders on Earth. Emma Carter, who had returned home after the debate, proved to be an invaluable ally. Together, they drafted a proposal for joint initiatives aimed at addressing global challenges using innovations developed on Mars. The plan included everything from water purification systems to renewable energy grids, all designed to be implemented in underserved communities. It was ambitious, but it was also practical, a tangible step toward bridging the gap between the two worlds. The response was mixed. Some politicians embraced the idea, seeing it as a way to boost their public image. Others remained skeptical, questioning whether the colony's contributions were truly as impactful as claimed. Still, enough support emerged to move forward with pilot programs in several countries. News outlets covered the developments extensively, highlighting stories of success and resilience. Slowly but surely, attitudes began to shift. On Mars, life continued much as it always had. Hard work, long hours, and constant vigilance. Yet there was a subtle difference now. Settlers found themselves motivated not just by survival, but by purpose. They weren't just building a colony. They were building a bridge. Every breakthrough, no matter how small, felt like a victory for humanity as a whole. One evening, Karoline and Ryan stood outside the Habitat Dome, watching the twin moons of Mars rise above the horizon. The sky was dark, dotted with stars that seemed impossibly bright against the barren landscape. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Ryan broke the silence. "You ever think about how far we've come?" he asked, his voice soft. "Not just here on Mars, but everywhere. Humanity started out staring at those same stars, wondering if we'd ever reach them. And now look at us." Karoline smiled faintly. "It's funny, isn't it? We spend so much time fighting over borders and beliefs, but when you look at it from out here, none of that matters. We're all just people." "Yeah," Ryan said, nodding. "And maybe that's the lesson we needed to learn, that no matter where we are, we're stronger together." Their conversation was interrupted by a sudden alert from inside the habitat. Rushing back to the control room, they discovered that Earth had sent an unexpected transmission. At first, they feared it might be bad news, another accusation or demand for accountability. But as they opened the message, they realized it was something entirely different. The video showed a young girl standing in front of a newly installed water filtration system in a remote village. Behind her, villagers gathered around, smiling and cheering. The girl spoke haltingly in broken English, her words filled with gratitude. "Thank you," she said, pointing to the camera. "This is because of you, because of Mars." Karoline felt tears welling up in her eyes. She glanced at Ryan, who looked equally moved. "This is why we do what we do," she whispered. "Not for fame or glory, but for moments like this." As word of the girl's message spread throughout the colony, morale soared. Settlers who had once doubted the value of their work now saw its impact firsthand. Even critics on Earth struggled to deny the positive outcomes of the joint initiatives. Protesters who had once marched under banners reading "Earth First" began advocating for collaboration instead. Social media buzzed with hashtags like "Together for Tomorrow," uniting voices from across the globe. Emma Carter played a key role in amplifying these stories. She traveled to villages, cities, and refugee camps, documenting the changes brought about by Martian technology. Her reports painted a vivid picture of progress, not perfection, but progress nonetheless. In interviews, she often credited Karoline and the settlers for their willingness to share their knowledge and resources. "They didn't have to do this," Emma said during one televised appearance, "but they chose to, and that choice has made all the difference." Despite the growing harmony, challenges remained. Not everyone supported the new direction. Laura Myers, though disgraced, still had followers who believed in her vision of dominance rather than partnership. Her shadow lingered, a reminder that Trust was fragile and alliances could fracture at any moment. But Karoline refused to let fear dictate their future. Instead, she focused on building connections, on proving that cooperation was worth the effort. Months turned into years, and the relationship between Earth and Mars evolved into something neither world had anticipated. Joint missions became commonplace, with teams traveling between planets to share expertise and ideas. Schools on Earth incorporated lessons about space exploration into their curriculums, inspiring a new generation to dream big. On Mars, settlers celebrated milestones not just as achievements for themselves but as victories for all of humanity. Karoline often thought about the day she had watched Michelle Obama's speech, the moment that had set everything in motion. What had started as a personal reaction to criticism had grown into something far greater, a movement toward unity. She knew the journey wasn't over. There would always be disagreements, setbacks, and obstacles to overcome. But for the first time in a long time, she felt hopeful. One morning, as the sun rose over the red sands of Mars, Karoline stepped outside to watch the dawn. Beside her stood Ryan, his face lit by the golden light. Together, they gazed at the horizon, where the promise of a brighter future stretched endlessly before them. Humanity's story was far from finished, but thanks to their efforts, it had taken a step closer to the stars. And somewhere, billions of miles away, a little girl drank clean water and dreamed of reaching them too.